All right, hi everyone. In this video, we are going to discuss iteration, in particular for loops in R. But more generally, iteration in programming is when we repeatedly run the same code block until some condition is satisfied. And the two main iteration approaches in R and just about any other programming language are for loops and while loops. And again, this is not specific to R. These are loops that are used in just about any other programming language. Just the syntax for how we input things is going to be a little bit different depending on which programming language that you're in. But the main concept of what a for loop is really useful and applies to other programming languages. There are some other iteration loops that you can run, like a repeat loop that runs until some break function is used. I'll just say like repeat loops and using the break and the next functions, these are not as commonly used or needed. And usually a for loop or a while loop is the main iteration technique that we're going to be coding. So in this video, I want to start with for loops. And these are useful when we know in advance what values we want to iterate over or how many times we want to perform a task. And so the basic syntax that we use for a for loop is given here. So we begin the for loop with for, F-O-R, and then a space. And then inside a set of rounded parentheses, we enter an index. And so the index name is typically an iterator that like I or J or K or L, you typically don't want to write a long set of strings to define your iterator. I is usually the most popular one that is used. So that's what we'll use in the default sense here. So I would have some index or some iterator I. Then we type the text in for in, and then we enter a vector of values. So it's going to be for I in, and then over here would be a vector. And then we close that off with a right parenthesis, and then we enter a space. And then inside a set of curly braces, we enter the action that is going to be run in our loop. And we typically use the syntax here to help make it readable, where I'll put a line break after I begin the curly brace, the left curly brace. I indent all of the actions that are going to be run inside this for loop, and then I close it off, back off on a separate line. I close it with a right curly parenthesis. And so what happens when we run a for loop like this is that the iterator, if we call it I, is going to take the first value in the vector of values that we enter. It's going to use that value presumably somewhere in the code that is run. It's going to run all the way through that code. And then once that is done executing, it's going to go back up and set I equal to the next value in vector of values. And then it's going to substitute that value of I into the code that is run in the for loop. Once it finishes running all of those commands, it's going to come back up and increase the value of I to the next value in the vector that you entered. So it's going to keep repeating the code in the loop until the iterator I has reached the last value in this vector, and then the for loop stops at that point. So let's take a look at a simple example of this before we start to think about more complicated examples. So in this first example, we have an index, an iterator that we call I. So it begins with for, and then we have space, and then we have inside a set of parentheses, we name the iterator, and I can name that whatever I want. I is usually the default. then in, because what I want to do is use values for I that are in this vector. And in this case, our vector is a set of integers 1, 2, 3. So that's what 1:3 means. It's all of the integers between 1 and 3 inclusive. So that means this for loop is going to run 1, 2, 3 times when I is equal to 1, when I is equal to 2, and when I is equal to 3. So when I run this code cell, it's going to first say, okay, let's first set I equal to the first value in this vector, which is 1. Then it's going to run this code using I as equal to 1. So what we're going to say here is this message function is what we use to print a message to the screen. So this is going to tell us, it's going to print the message, the current iterator value is, and we have a space, then it's going to stop with typing a character string, and it's going to enter the value that is stored in I. Now that command is done. Then it's going to go back up and change the value of I to the next value in the vector, which is 2. So now it's going to set I equal to 2 and perform this action, which is print the text, the current indicator value is, or the current iterator value is space. And now it's going to input 2 in place of I. And then it's going to go back up, set I equal to the next value in the vector, which is 3. This is the last value in the vector. So this is the last time this for loop is going to run, but it is going to run one more time, printing this message to the screen using the value 3 in place of I. And now we exit the for loop and we're done. So when I run this for loop, I should see 3 messages printed on the screen, and we can see them right here. The first corresponded to when the iterator was 1, then we increased it to 2, then we increased I to 3, and that was the last value in our vector. So then the for loop exits. So that's how for loops work. So hopefully you've got a sense for the syntax, but we could run multiple actions inside of this for loop, and that's typically what happens.